fracking, drilling, oil, solar, Keystone, eco-friendly, I could go on. They're all buzzwords that now inspire knee-jerk, sometimes emotional responses from one, both, or either side here. We have reached a moment in history, I think we'd all agree, when energy and politics have intersected in very complicated ways. And joining us now to take us beyond the hype and those buzzwords I just threw out there is Michael Levi. He's a senior fellow for energy and the environment at the Council on Foreign Relations. He's also the director of CFR's program on energy security and climate change. And he's also the author of a new book. It's called The Power Surge: Energy Opportunity and the Battle for America's Future. Michael, thank you very much for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
You know, Michael, I'll admit, I probably am not alone in that when it came to climate change and alternative energies, I basically read what I needed to, even as a talk show host, so I could get to the next subject. But I have found myself in recent years completely being engrossed in where we are right now as both the planet here and some of those alternatives, and I can't think I'm alone. And I even use a benchmark we saw earlier this month, on May 9th, in fact, where the daily mean concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere of Mauna Loa in Hawaii surpassed 400 parts per million for the first time since they started recording this back in '58. Now, I'm not sure exactly what it means, except I know it's the wrong kind of record to be setting. Do you find in both the audience for this book that it's not just the policy wonks, but the general public is starting to say, like me, what planet am I giving my kids here, and what kind of alternatives are they going to have ahead of them?
I think that's absolutely right. Every time we add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, we're increasing the risks of dangerous climate change. And while that recording is the highest it's been since they started several decades ago, had they been keeping that record for the last few million years, it would still have been the highest that we'd seen. So that's scary. And the world that energy affects and the world of energy itself are changing enormously rapidly, whether it's any of those buzzwords that you brought up or the consequences that we're seeing for the climate, for geopolitics, for the economy. It's all happening very fast. It makes it very interesting, but also really important to get on top of.
Let's talk about individually maybe some of the issues that we've done in this program with a lot of invested parties. Fracking, a big issue in New York, especially when you go up to the northern tier here and also western New York. We also went out to Dimmock in Pennsylvania and got a firsthand account from people on both sides of the aisle. I know it's not a one-size-fits-all because there's different types of extraction, but from what you've gathered from a policy standpoint, do you think there's an inevitability with fracking that it's going to happen? Maybe it looks differently in different places, or that there's a little bit of a buyer's beware from the places we've seen it happen already?
What I end up concluding is that while a lot of the companies can do things right without the rules, not all of them will. And so if we want to have people be confident that this can be done right as a benefit to their communities without the big risks, we need to get the rules right. We need to take our time to get them right and make sure that people comply with them.
Michael, in our viewing area is Indian Point, which is, as it relates to nuclear power plants, by a multiple almost, the highest population density around it, arguably one of the more controversial plants in the country. It's up for relicensing right now, and without boring everybody, that folks really in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, are going to be making this decision, none of the stakeholders here. After Fukushima, a lot of people said, time out. This was supposed to be a safe alternative energy. Is the reward worth the risk? What do you think? Do you think in a generation we're going to see more nuclear power plants in this country? Or do you think we're going to see what we're seeing in Europe, where they're starting to shut them down or even decommission some?
I think a lot will depend on what we do with our climate policy. Right now we have these existing nuclear power plants. They're getting older. They come up for relicensing. And it's challenging if they have to put in place the safety upgrades that we know they need to do, and they're facing relatively low natural gas costs. Their economics can be tough, and we certainly aren't seeing a lot of new nuclear power plants, again, because the economics are tough, even setting aside the safety concerns. I think if we put in place a serious climate policy that penalized coal and oil and gas for the greenhouse gas emissions they create, then nuclear would be more competitive. Can I predict whether it's nuclear or renewables or something else that would thrive in that environment? I think it's unwise to predict things 20 years out in the future. But that's the world that I could imagine nuclear playing a growing role.
I also think there's this perception out there that because technology is advancing so fast in so many different genres, that in many ways we'll solve this problem through a lab somewhere, and we'll figure out a way to repair the ozone layer. We'll figure out a way to enlarge the ice caps. I mean, it sounds silly, but when you talk to people, you get this impression that this will all go away by itself, even if they believe in climate change. So my question to you is, where do we go from the policy to the passion when it comes to the public to change the way that we do business in this world?
So people need to see the potential consequences and the real consequences of climate change where they live. I think that's the experience we've seen. And they need to accept that this isn't all going to happen autonomously from technology. When I was writing the book, I visited a plant that makes big mirrors for solar farms outside of Pittsburgh. And this was set up in 2009 when the owners expected supportive policy. When I got there, it was only half built because the policy hadn't showed up. And I saw a stack of huge mirrors, heavy mirrors, sitting on the side. I asked where they were shipping them. I thought maybe California, Nevada. They told me they were shipping them to India, these enormous mirrors halfway around the world, because India had developed a supportive policy for solar installations. And that was the decisive factor. So it's important to remember technology helps us pursue our goals, but it's not a substitute for pursuing them.
Again, the book is The Power Surge, Energy Opportunity in the Battle for America's Future. Michael Levi. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate a few minutes.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, everybody, please stay with us. RFL will be right back right after this.